or unceded lands of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people who call Turtle Island home. For myself, I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Snuneymuxw First Nation. And I'd like to extend my deep gratitude to the Snuneymuxw people for the privilege of living and working on their beautiful land. Now, before we start today's webinar, I would also like to do a few introductions and quickly run through some housekeeping items. For those of you who may be joining a Charity Village webinar for the first time, Charity Village is Canada's largest online job board for the nonprofit sector. And in addition to our online job board, organizations can also post volunteer positions. So if you are looking for work or to recruit talent in the sector, Charity Village is a great place to start. We also have a lot of excellent resources for nonprofit professionals, including online courses, articles, fundraising tools, and free webinars like the one we're presenting today. Now, before I introduce our topic and speakers for today, I will just quickly run through some housekeeping items. So you may have noticed when you joined the webinar today that you were automatically put on mute. Since we do have hundreds of participants on today's webinar, it's very important for us to minimize the amount of background noise so that everyone can clearly hear the presentation. You can still ask questions and make comments. You'll just need to use the question box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel. So please look for that at the right of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar today. So just submit your questions as you think of them, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. You can also always email your questions to webinars@charityvillage.com. If you happen to encounter any technical issues with the webinar today, that could be with viewing the presentation or with the audio, please also let us know in the question box or send us an email. We'll do our best to get any technical difficulties resolved as quickly as we can. But in a worst case scenario, just remember that we are recording today's webinar, and we will send you that full recording by email, most likely this afternoon. So if you do get called away or disconnected for any reason, you'll still be able to view the full presentation afterwards. So with that, I'd like to welcome our presenters for today. We're so happy to have our very own Mary Barroll, President of Charity Village, as well as Daryl Hatton, CEO of Fundraiser. So Mary, I'm going to turn things over to you now to get us started.
Well, thank you, Marina, for that introduction and that land acknowledgement. I'm hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat in Toronto, Ontario. So welcome today to Charity Village's webinar. I'm joined by Daryl Hatton, CEO of Fundraiser, and Fundraiser is Charity Village's partner for our new crowdfunding services that we launched in 2020 to help nonprofits during the pandemic. And we're excited about talking about that today and some of the best practices in crowdfunding. We're going to be talking about how to stop overthinking and start raising money online. And so welcome, Daryl.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks, Mary.
Okay, so I think one of the first things we wanted to address is really about in the feedback that we've had from a lot of the presentations that we've done in terms of our crowdfunding platform. We've heard a bunch of different sort of questions and sort of, I would say, reservations by people who may not have experienced or ever carried out their own crowdfunding campaign. And so we thought we'd tackle that by doing some myth bustings about, what their fears may be and showing how you can overcome those and do a fantastic crowdfunding campaign as we break down some of the barriers and you're thinking about it and some of these reservations that you may have had if you've never done it before.
Right. It's really interesting. I think there's a bit of a fear of the unknown that happens in some of this. And this is one of the things we really want to try and highlight today is how easy it can be to get started and to really do some great results right off the bat. And we've got some examples that will show of people that have done exactly that, their first crowdfunding campaign and what it looked like and how successful it was. So is it,
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, I think the best way to learn really is to take a look, seeing is believing, and walking through sort of case studies is a really great way to sort of learn the various aspects of crowdfunding and how you put together a campaign and how you execute it successfully. And so that's what we're here today to do. And so let's start with the fundamental question for those that may never have done a crowdfunding campaign. Just what is it all about? Maybe you could give us that shorthand version, Daryl.
Sure. Well, we have a definition here, how it's online and social and the techniques that are involved in fundraising. But really, this is about helping get the community around you to help you with your fundraising. So that community is typically on Facebook or social media, but it's also the people that you already have that are willing to communicate with you electronically by emails, for example. So the goal of crowdfunding is to help build this community of advocates that'll help you both by giving you contributions and by helping you promote your cause into the wider community to help you attract new donors. That's the kind of the hidden component of it that people don't focus on enough. We focus on, how can we get more cash? But really what this is, how can you get somebody who's going to support you longer term? So
Right.
that's the kind of key component of all this. And if we think about it, it's designed for these kind of activities, about the social engagement. A lot of the things in a crowdfunding platform are about the tools for sharing and commenting and getting people involved. And one of the reasons this is really important is this new generation of donors that's coming on. As the boomers are aging out slowly, and we're trying to find ways to replace the revenue that has come from them over our past with the new donors, we need to reach out to places where they are and to go to where, how they would like to communicate. And so that's a really important component of this, is it is targeted to what I would call digital natives, as opposed to Gen Z or anything like that. It's not so much about the generation, it's about where do people want to be. And so younger generations tend to want to be a digital experience, so they typically gravitate to this. But that's really important to think of it, is it's digital natives, people who want to be talked to digitally more than just younger people. And part of the idea here is to take and get to amplify the reach. I mean, it's very hard to acquire new donors right now and in a very noisy marketplace if you're trying to advertise online. But if you have advocates who are promoting the message for you, it's free to get their advocacy, and it can help you reach people that you never would have reached before.
Yeah, and I think to your point about this not being necessarily about the next generation of donors, but also digital donors. And we all went through that in the nonprofit sector, where we really had to transform our fundraising with the pandemic. And so many of our organizations and our communities really made a massive transformation of their fundraising strategies and the tools that they use, but maybe hadn't yet reached out to try to do a crowdfunding campaign. And I think this is why it's so timely to talk about this, because as we're entering the season of giving, there's still opportunities to be able to start some of these campaigns to be part of this year's season of giving. So I think the timing for this presentation is so critical, and really the kind of benefits that crowdfunding can bring as another way, another tool, another arrow in your quiver of tools that you use to actually do fundraising and engage with your donors. We know that it can actually, in designing it, they have self-serve tools that are part of our platform, that the effort that's required for them is far less, and it's far less costly than, say, trying to have a live event, in-person event, like a gala that requires a lot of investment of time, resources, and money, and that in fact it's especially if it's the first time you've done it, it's sure not. It has very low risk in terms of a cost-benefit analysis to give it a try for the first time. And then, of course, this integration of your social media, even if you haven't yet built a social media, I guess, network, crowdfunding can actually help you build that out from your email database of your donors and your supporters, and we can tell you how to do that. So is there anything else you wanted to add about some of the benefits that crowdfunding has, Daryl?
I think one of the really important ones for this conversation is rapid response.
Right.
You know, there's a concern that we have to, the whole topic of this is how to stop overthinking and start getting involved in here. And crowdfunding can be very, very quick and easy to get something up and running, way quicker than making changes to your website or trying to, even onboard a whole series of new tools. This is a way you can get started right away, as you said, with a low risk experiment. And that's a lot of what this is about, is experimenting safely with your community to help you find ways to grow it. So there's lots of benefits here, but those are the kind of the key ones for this time of year about being able to do something quickly and easily and without a whole lot of skills development or training. That's really important. So that kind of gets into the myths that we were talking about. And what we've been talking, I know, Mary, when you've been talking to customers, and certainly what we hear is that some of the things that people are worried about when they're thinking about adopting crowdfunding come into these 4 areas. Don't have the time and the money to try this out, that it might be risky to my existing donor base. I might take a gift that I was going to get from an existing donor and make it a lot smaller because I tried to do it with crowdfunding. And, or I don't have a crowd online at all. Like, how am I going to get a social media following when I've got 5 Facebook friends and I know who all those people are? And one of the big things is that if we're going after, crowdfunding tends to have smaller donations, what we call micro donations or micro gifts. And are they really worth the trouble to go and get something like that? And we wanted to try and address those. Is there anything else that you kind of know about this, or conversations you had with customers?
Well, I think certainly some of these points have been the questions that have come up in previous presentations that we've had on crowdfunding. And I think it's the first thing that jumps into people's minds when they start contemplating it. And, in terms of all of these, they really are, as we're going to point out and walk you through examples of, truly they are myths. And we're going to show you just exactly how to overcome that by really teaching you how to think about how to ideate and organize a crowdfunding project without big resources or a huge investment of time, and to be able to actually start it and maintain it and even build on it as you're actually executing that campaign. So it's an exciting opportunity to share that information with you. Also, the one thing that's really fascinating to me about this is this whole idea of cannibalizing your own donor base. But when we'll be able to show you how to actually use your donor base as ambassadors. And instead of going to them with an ask for more money, it's really about them helping you spread the word of the good work that you're doing and sharing it with their own networks. And that's really about expanding your donor base, not cannibalizing it. So really powerful tool. And then we're going to talk about, if you haven't got what you think you have, which is an online audience, how crowdfunding campaigns can help you build out that particular part of your donor base. And you already have a way to connect with them, either by phone or by mail or email. And we're going to show you how to turn them into social media connections and join that part of your ambassadorship to be able to build exponentially that social media following with really great content about your missions and your crowdfunding campaigns. And then finally, we're going to explain to you how the power of micro donations given over time can end up being extremely large donations, and why they work with a certain kind of donor base that you may not be as familiar with, or you may already have within your donor base, but you just haven't engaged that part of the way that they enjoy giving. So those are the kind of things we're going to explore.
Yeah, and I hit the button a little fast on you there, but so the number one myth is that, as a small nonprofit, typically, I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, I don't have anybody in my team to do this, and is it going to cost me some money to do crowdfunding? And these are stresses that people really are feeling. And so what we wanted to do was to give some examples of campaigns that were running in the pandemic, under all the duress of the pandemic, especially at the very beginning of the pandemic, when we didn't know what this thing was going to look like. It was this dark cloud that rolled into our horizon and obscured everything. And it was kind of really unsettling for everyone about what's going to happen, because you may have just got the news that your gala was going to be canceled and your golf tournament, and I don't know how else we're going to get any funding this year. So an example of this is the Bloom Group did a campaign in the beginning of the pandemic, and the Bloom Group is running with kind of one executive director who's doing the majority of this work, and they have a couple of people on staff that are doing other service delivery things. But she took this on to run the campaign for herself. She had her campaign up and running in a week. And what it was doing was telling the story, the very timely story, about what kind of help they needed to help keep delivering service to their clients during the early stages of the pandemic. And it's really easy to forget that one of the hot topics at the time was things like, how do we get personal protective equipment to everyone? And how do we help when the lockdown, with a mom and her child who's kind of locked up in their suite, not able to go out, how do we help support them? So they ran a campaign like this that was done, and they raised a surprising amount of money to them. Their goal was $30,000. They ended up getting over $43,000 for it as their first attempt at crowdfunding. One of the ways that they really were able to take advantage of the platform is the Charity Village crowdfunding platform has the idea of incentives. And these are things like wishes, where you can just describe the giving that someone can do in terms of granting a wish. And in doing this, it helps the donor visualize the kind of impact they're making. So for example, in this, they had a couple of different wish options. If you gave $100, it supported a mom and her child with a clothing gift card. This was actually a slight change that they did in the campaign as they moved forward. In the beginning, it was to get that mom and a child personal protective equipment, hand sanitizers, and a toy for the child, so that they had something to do while they were inside waiting to go out in the pandemic. But by expressing the levels of giving in this visual way, it really helped the donors understand at a deeper level the kind of impact they were going to make. And as a result, they're typically willing to give more. And if they may have supported you during the year with a regular annual gift, this is a place where they would look at it potentially as going, I'll do this as well. So it doesn't have to reduce the amount that was given, but actually increase the giving from any particular donor.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about it is it goes back to this idea, and it goes to of actually being able to see where your money is going. And we know that so many donors are motivated by that, and it gives concrete sort of benefits or achievements to that giving. It's not just cutting a check or pressing click on the donate button. It's actually telling a story about the impact that they're making. And I think that's one of the ways that crowdfunding is so powerful, with these visual narratives that continue throughout the campaign.
Well, and when we talk about social sharing, donors, typically digital donors, do like to share the fact that they've made an impact. Now, it can feel sometimes kind of crass to say, I gave $100 to a cause. But if the social media story that we generate from the platform is, I supported a mom and child, that's a different message to the community. And as a result, it's a lot easier for people to want to share that, and for people to want to click on it and see what happened, because it's not about the money, it's about the impact. And that's right. A really key component of a successful crowdfunding campaign, is helping people understand this impact that's being generated. Now, when we're short on time, one of the benefits of being short on time is it creates urgency. And that's a really important thing, is to set deadlines on a campaign. Many campaigns only run a few weeks before they exhaust their interest, and it's time to go do another one. The nice thing about a crowdfunding platform is it's so easy to do new campaigns on new projects that we can start breaking things down into much smaller bites. And it's much easier for us to both work on and for the donors to want to support. But by creating these deadlines and the sharing of updates and things like that on the progress of the campaign, it helps create some empathy in the donors. we're constantly communicating back to them, not necessarily another ask for more funding, but on the results of what's happened. So here's an example where they posted an update about what was going on, and they were talking about kind of the benefits that they're giving and that it's not too late to keep helping. So even though they're doing an ask implicit in this, they're showing that there's progress being made. And that a lot of people want to see that there's a result for their donation. This is a great way to do it.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I just want to point out that before we move on, we want to emphasize the fact that there was one person who carried out this campaign. It was the first crowdfunding campaign they ever carried out, and it was up in a week. And right. They actually went beyond what their goal was by over $10,000, which I think is an extraordinary sort of example of how flexible and how quick crowdfunding campaigns can be, as well as how effective they are.
For sure. So if we deal with the kind of the second myth that it'll cannibalize our donor base.
and nobody wants to look like this. Nobody wants to cannibalize their donors. So we totally get the attitudes of organizations who are a little bit fearful about that possible outcome. And we're saying that's not what's going to happen. And we'll show you how to avoid this terrible outcome and, cannibalizing your own donor base.
So one of the examples that we wanted to talk about here, and this is just one of the techniques that's available in doing a crowdfunding campaign. There's a group called iTeams that runs missionary travel work where they'll support schools and hospitals and that in other countries. And one of the projects that they typically ran every year was a thing to support their activities in Romania. Now, this is where they'll get a lot of people from the community involved in some sort of physical activity, where it was doing burpees or it was doing a run or something like that. And with the pandemic, they had to respond to do something virtually because they weren't going to be able to get these people who would typically help them out through activities together into one room to be able to do it. So they set out with a pretty modest goal. They said, can we raise what we would normally do offline, which was about $13,000 a year, with an online campaign with trying out some virtual fundraising. And they used a little creativity to show how they would do that, in that they had everyone do the walk or run in their neighborhood and then take selfies or selfie videos of themselves participating and upload it into the main campaign page. The crowdfunding platform has a way to do this safely, where you can have this kind of commentary or content uploaded, and at the same time having these participants sharing out to their networks their own activities and support. And by doing it in this way, they got a report back from the people that they've never felt as connected with the community between Canada and Romania, because they were doing it in both countries simultaneously. They've never had that feeling of community before in the same depth. And so it was strengthening the community, but also helping to share out to new participants because of this social sharing that was going on. It's one thing to say, hey, I gave a gift to a cause. It's another thing to say, hey, I'm running in my neighborhood in the middle of the pandemic to support this cause, and here's a little video about why I support them. That has a much deeper level of engagement for people to say, wow, that's cool. I didn't know you did that. Maybe I'll help. So, I think that this is the kind of thing where it's taking people who may have given before, and by getting their participation in the online campaign, helping them find net new donors in the community. So it's leveraging the donor base to get more donors, not to cannibalize or reduce the gifts.
Yeah, right. So the interesting thing was, not only did it, even for the existing donors that were part of this previously, they were able to engage with their own networks to be able to both share what they were doing and also the mission that was part of their campaign and the goals. and then had an opportunity to actually expand the reach of both the campaign and the actual knowledge of the organization itself to a much broader audience. So rather than actually cannibalize its donor base, it actually used the donor base to be really ambassadors and to be active participants in the campaign and share it with their communities and their families to create a much larger, now international potential donor base, but certainly ambassadors for the organization and their mission.
And it's kind of important to think that this isn't just the overall fundraising for the organization for the year. This was just one project that they were running. So this added in and gave them more diversity in the revenue that they're getting, because they have now different types of events. They have different communities that they're reaching, and they can put messages out very specifically into the community that cares about Romania, different from the community they have that cares about Honduras and other areas of the world. So it's a great way to kind of deliver the right information to the right crowd. And when they ran this campaign again this year, they blew through their goal again. And I think, if I recall, they raised over $40,000. So if you think about that, that's almost a 300% improvement over 2 years. And they're looking forward to doing it again because people are having fun with it. They're able to reach a broader audience, and this level of engagement is something they haven't experienced before.
I just wanted to point out to the audience that we are getting questions in about some of these campaigns, and we've got time at the end. We will be addressing some of the questions that are related to these campaigns that we're talking about. Just wanted to let you know that we're staying on top of it, and we'll make sure to address those.
And I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read the chat. So we'll get to it.
I'll help you out, Daryl.
That was TMI, right? So myth number 3 is that, many of the groups that we talk to say, hey, look, I'm just new to this. We've got a small Facebook page. We don't have a big online audience. How do I deal with that? And so the myth is that you need this huge audience in order to make it successful in the beginning. It's obviously a growth thing. We need to start somewhere. And the point is, whatever you've got is what you've got. We can start with that. But there's some unexpected techniques that you can use to help build that audience that you may not have thought of. And do you want to say anything on this before I jump into the next slide, Mary?
Just that we all know this feeling is, well, what's the point of talking to an empty room? What's the point of, doing social media if I don't have a following? But of course, you certainly need to have the communication before you can fill that room, before you can get followers. But the great thing about crowdfunding is it actually gives you something that is really engaging, that allows you to both transform your contacts and your community into followers of your social media. And so it's while carrying on a campaign that's raising money, you're also building out your social media followers, and that helps your organization overall beyond just the campaign that you're running to raise funds for that particular project. So let's tackle this one, Daryl.
Well, so one of the ways we say is, if you don't have a crowd, there's kind of 3 techniques that you can use to build the crowd. One of them is to literally do building of a crowd, which is where you start publishing content about the work you're doing in the hopes that you're going to attract people to your website and to the campaign pages you have, and they'll start to follow you and they'll start to become a digital crowd. You're publishing some stuff on Facebook, etc. So there's a building component of it. The problem with that is it takes a long time. Then there's the other option of trying to buy ads. So you can buy your crowd, trying to get out in front of people. And with the noisy marketplace that's out there right now, it's very expensive to try and do that, and it's not very effective. It's hard to do. But one of the techniques that can get you a crowd is to borrow a crowd. And when we say borrow a crowd, the nice thing about a crowd is you can share your crowd with somebody else, and it doesn't diminish your ownership of that crowd if you do it well. And the idea there is that if you can find others in the community who already want to support you to help bring their crowds to you because they like the work that you're doing, it can really help you. So give you an example here is the Harvest Project in North Vancouver had to do a very quick and rapid response to the pandemic. They actually had to shut down their warehouse, which was distributing food and clothing, and go completely online. And one of the things that they did was very creative, was reach out to the sponsors that they had in the community to say, this is the things that we're doing. Will you share what we're doing with your customers, your employees, and maybe some of your supply chain partners? And in that doing that, they took what was a very small online crowd and they massively expanded their reach, because the sponsors were looking for other ways to help more than just writing a big check. In this case, they actually wrote some big checks along the way. You can see they raised $140,000, and this was quite a sophisticated campaign that they worked on. But they had local suppliers like Cargill and Kiewit who would give them fairly large checks that they used as matching dollar donations into this program. And those groups did their own promotion for their own reasons. They wanted to show that in the pandemic, they were helping out local causes. So it brought a much larger crowd than they ever could have reached on their own to these campaigns. And as a result, it funded substantially higher. And we'll talk about a technique that they used later on. If I can just quickly finish this, is Philippe, the fellow who was running this campaign, finally took some of the coaching we said, and we said, post an update, tell everybody about the good work that's happening. And he posted an update, and the next morning he phoned me and said, I can't believe it. We got a couple of brand new donors we've never seen before, just from the update, from people who saw what their existing supporters had shared out. They attracted brand new donors that they'd never worked with before. And that's the point, is that you can end up with new donor acquisition as well as the money that's coming in from these supporters.
Right, and I'd like to point out, I do a lot of work in employer branding through our sister company, Talent Ag, and we work with very large organizations who are all often sponsors to these kinds of campaigns, and work with charities and nonprofits across Canada as part of their corporate social responsibility initiatives, which we're all very much aware of. Now, of course, when they do that, they're extremely proud of giving back to their community. It's part of their employer brand and what they will call their core values of that organization. And so you have to understand that when you bring your sponsors in as part of your network of ambassadors, that you can expand your social reach really exponentially, because they share with their own community of customers, with their own community of internal employees, as well as their overall marketing and branding. So to be able to bring them in as part of the campaign instead of just being the organization that cuts the check is a way that you can expand your reach phenomenally. And the way to do that is really through peer-to-peer and crowdfunding campaigns.
Now, one of the interesting components of this is that people say, are micro donations worth the trouble? And if we're taking a look at it just simply from the lens of check size, then yes, there are more work to try and get these donations. But one of the benefits of the micro donation is that you might get someone engaged with you who only has limited funds available to help you, but they're an influencer in their network or their community. People look up to them for what they're doing. So when they share out to their community to say, hey, I'm supporting this cause, it can inspire many other contributions over and above what that initial micro gift was valued at. And the other thing about micro gifts is that people are willing to give them much more frequently. So Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation did a study, and they said, if we want to increase giving, counterintuitively, we should stop asking for more and start asking for a lot less, just more often. Because, and really quick math will show you, if you normally get $1,000 check from a donor in a year, if you can get them to give you $100 a month because you've given them good reason to give to you, you're a 20% increase at $1,200. This kind of model can apply in many other ways, because if with the digital donor demographics, if they have less disposable income, they might be really easy for them to pop off and give you $20. They don't think about it as much as say you said, hey, will you give me 100? But they might do that 4, 5, 6, 7 times a year if you give them good reason to. And with the advocacy that can come from that, it can help increase dramatically the funding that you get overall.
And I think it's also goes back to that whole point of transparency. And a lot of digital donors are very interested in seeing where their money is going. So it's a great way to use crowdfunding as a method to do that. Just you'll see, as we'll show in the example coming up, the use of micro donations and micro projects as a tool to use micro donations, how effective it can be to having cumulatively raising a lot more money by asking for less and associating it with an impact that the donor is actually making for each one of those micro donations.
So this project was using what we call micro projects. And a micro project is to take a large project and split it up into smaller component pieces so that the donor can see the impact that they're making, and it feels much more impactful. So if you imagine that you've got a project that takes $10,000 and someone gives their $50 to that project, it may not feel like it's making a big impact. But if you break up that project into a whole series of little projects, in this case, it was a bird rescue that has the individual birds that they're trying to work with, and some of them, Rosie and Floki and Artemis here that you'll see. By breaking it up into smaller pieces, people go, I really want to help Rosie. So I'll give my $100 or my $50 to Rosie. And if Rosie's goal was only 1,000, it felt like I made a much bigger impact on the overall. My gift mattered more. It's the same amount of money, but the feeling is different. And that's really an important part here, because we're in the business of selling feelings. We're helping people feel good about the work that they're doing. So the more we can do to make it feel better, the more gifts that they're going to give us.
And I think using this is a great example of micro projects, and I love it so much because for me it would be really hard to choose which one I'd like to engage with. But also,
well, the nice part is you can give to more than one.
Exactly, and exactly. So I think it has that benefit of being able to emotionally connect with the actual donation by having a visual story that's easy to create, but also to sort of supplement that with, all Rosie's community of other little birds that we want, or majestic birds that we want to support, like baby Lori and Artemis, and using that as a kind of narrative, and almost, I would say, like an episodic sort of story that we can continue to engage with and see the development when all of Rosie's vet's bills are suddenly paid because of the donations, and we know that Artemis's surgery is going to be underwritten because of the donations that really have taken a shine to Artemis. And so that kind of impact is being able to be followed in kind of an episodic narrative, which I think is really an exciting way to think about showing, the real impact that these micro donations can make over time.
And this is not just kind of this theory. This is being backed up with some research and some really hard numbers on showing that we can increase the number of gifts in aggregate over a period of time. And the underlying, this is the same technology that is used to run very simple campaigns on the Charity Village platform. And there's just additional things that you can do to kind of enrich the story as you go. And the goal for us is to not necessarily try and make a bigger event. Quite the opposite. What we want to try and do is get sustainable recurring funding going on, because someone can subscribe, make a recurring donation to help Rosie, for example, in this example. And as a result, you can start to build this base of recurring contributions where people go, Rosie's my girl. Like, I'm going to make sure she's okay, even though she's apparently really grumpy. You can get into the idea that people will take more ownership of your projects. And that smooths the revenue curve, helps you diversify away from having to rely on a gala or a golf tournament that may be canceled again. We'll see what happens this year. So it really is an important thing from your strategy of how to evolve into digital fundraising, is to give you these opportunities to make it more sustainable.
Right. And, if I'm a donor and I'm normally coming to your gala, I'm probably also going to give to Rosie or baby Lori. It's just a supplementary thing that I will want to do as part of my engagement with you. And this way I can share with my community the work that I'm doing to help Rosie and Lori and Flocky and Artemis, and helping you spread the word of the great work that the overall organization actually does, and potentially bring you more donors.
If Rosie laid an egg, there'll be a video camera set up to watch her, and everybody
Right.
will share that all the time, right? It's just, it gives you social media visibility you never would have had before. So let's tie it all together. When Mary and I were brainstorming this, we said, what's the best way to kind of help show you something that's really achievable and practical and what has been done? And so we thought we'd walk you through a campaign that was an award-winning campaign this year in the Charity Village Awards. And Mary, do you want to maybe tell everybody a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we actually had our inaugural Charity Village Conference and Awards. And of course, we had a variety of different awards for different categories, whether it was mental health or diversity, equity, and inclusion, youth engagement. Fundraising was another big part of it. And so we had awards for successful, creative, innovative fundraising generally, but also we had special awards for those that chose to use our platform in crowdfunding specifically, and highlighting sort of the creativity, the impact that they had, and the success that they achieved for their organizations. And one of the winners was, in fact, Pat Stone and their Worry Monster campaign, which and we're looking at it right now. That's an image of a graphic image of the Worry Monster, and I'll turn it over to Daryl to talk about what the campaign was about, and we'll see some examples.
And one of the key things that's important here is that when we take a look at a crowdfunding campaign, there's a few elements that are really important for it to be successful. One part of that is, what's the story? What is the reason that you need the funding, and why is it that people will be able to help you and want to help you? We're going to dig into that quite a bit in this next little bit. There's also the idea of urgency, is that the more immediate the need is, the more people feel like they can help. We're motivated to help in crisis, but we're also motivated to help when it's important. And so being able to show some urgency in getting it done is really important. A successful crowdfunding campaign will leverage partners, like you saw with the Harvest Project, where they got their corporate sponsors in, or even just strong advocates who are willing to share it for you. A key to making it work is, how do you promote it? And how do you get your audience, your advocates, to promote it for you? And a lot of that, it deals with the kind of content that you can provide them for sharing. And one of the best ways to keep the conversation going over the course of a campaign is to provide updates on the progress. So we're going to walk through these kind of ideas when we show you this campaign, and we're going to flip to live. So we're going to lose the safety net. I'm going to go out in the tightrope and we'll see what happens. Never start a demo with anything more predictable. They'll watch this. But what we'd like you to take away is, we're going to try and show you how to tell a crowdfunding story, how to craft your story. And this applies to a lot of the fundraising you'll do, even if you're not doing crowdfunding, but it's really important in crowdfunding. We'll give you an example of the story, and we'll tell you how they got there. So let's flip over here, and I think if I got the right one, yes, there we go. So this is an example of a crowdfunding campaign. I want to reiterate that this is the first crowdfunding campaign that they'd ever run.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I interviewed them because we're doing a podcast on fundraising, and it's going to launch in November. And so I was interviewing some of the winners of our podcast on our podcast of the winners of the Charity Village Awards, and it's going to be coming out in December. And the interesting thing about this particular project was, wow, there was only 2 people on the team. They had it up virtually in no time, and it was just sort of a confluence of these great ideas and their desire to want to do a crowdfunding campaign. So I'll let you give the background, Daryl, to talk about what the mission was and how this fit into it, because this is a micro project, right?
Well, this is a very specific project that they were working on, that they wanted to have funding out of all of the things that they did in the year. So in that way, we classify it as a micro project. because a donor making a contribution to this can really feel the difference that they've made. Now, this, to be full disclosure, I cloned this campaign. One of the great things about our platform is that you can take a copy of an existing campaign and redo it to start for next year right away. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to touch a couple of things on it for them and show them. But part of the thing that we do with this is we know that this is a new topic for most organizations. And so we provide training like this webinar, but we also provide some coaching. And we can help. We have crowdfunding strategists on our team that can answer some questions about what to do, how to make it work for you. And we worked with these guys to help tell their story. So the key thing that you're going to see is this was their approach. They said, we would like to be kind of this colorful, attractive thing, and we're going to be a little whimsical because we're dealing with a worry monster. The idea is that they had to tell the story of why they needed worry monsters. And so this is the part I wanted to get into. This is their campaign page. This is the content that they created. But the formula goes like this. We say something that everybody's likely to agree with right at the beginning. So they said the past year, mental health of every one of us has been challenged. Most people go, yeah, for sure, I get it. That little mental twig helps the donor or the reader switch over sides of the fence right away to go, oh, I already agree with these people. That's a really important little step. And it may seem trivial, but it actually really helps psychologically. Then the thing that we say is, tell everyone what the problem is. And so they just called it the problem. And they said, they went through and described how kids are being affected by the pandemic and how they're feeling anxiety. And they summarized it really well. They said, in short, kids have lost their balance. So then we said, well, tell them what the solution is. The solution is, first off, this great news. We have a solution, but we need your help to get there. And then they described the Worry Monster doll and how the Worry Monster program works, where kids write down their worries, they feed it into the doll, and they zip the mouth closed. And when the child goes then in for counseling session, the counselor can remove the worries, read them out, and help discuss them with the child. And so they showed the story of what the monsters were all about. And this is really kind of important stuff. They showed it in context. They showed examples of kids with the monsters and how it worked. So great, we've got a problem, we've got a solution, but so what? What's the need? And this is where we say, point out the gap. This is the problem that we're trying to solve, really, is that we've got all these kids that need a monster, but we don't have the funds to get enough of them. So if you can help us by helping even one more kid get a Worry Monster doll, we're all doing well here. And so then they show how you can help. And in this case, they used an interesting technique on the platform. You notice how these are kind of laid out as a bit of a grid. Each one of these is actually a button that links through that if you want to give one of these, a child, a Worry Monster doll, if you click on this, it takes you into the checkout flow with the amount $30 pre-selected. Or if you want to give this, or you want to give $100, you want to help the family too, it's pre-selected. So back to that idea like we showed you with the Bloom Group and the COVID campaign, by making it very visual, I get that this is a little girl that's going to be talking with a counselor. I can see in my mind that's the result I'm buying. And people are way more willing to give for this because it's so concrete.
Right, and certainly from a visual, it's a beautifully designed campaign, but it also connects emotionally to something that we all experience. But then when we think of the way children have been, struggling through this as well, and the needs that they have, it really made the impact much, much more clear. And so, it was great to hear from the creators of this campaign directly about how they felt about the campaign and the success of it, and they were just really stunned at how successful it was because it was their very first crowdfunding campaign. So they not only won an award, which was well deserved, but they also did an enormous amount in raising the profile of their small organization, which is under 20 people, of the Pathstone Mental Health organization. And as well as the overall mission that they had. So it was an incredible, you know, really hit it out of the park kind of moment for them. And of course, they're contemplating continuing to do crowdfunding as part of their ongoing sustainable source of fundraising. And just before I just want to remind Daryl that we do have questions coming in. So if you wanted to wrap up our chat about this.
So one quick thing that I wanted to show everybody, this looks like a lovely, you know, professionally designed web page, right? And how am I going to get that done for my organization? And what we wanted to show you was something that's really important here. This is the administrative interface for making this campaign. And we try and guide through and make this very, very consumer friendly, very first time user friendly. But that whole part of the campaign story is down in here. If you take a look at it, this is how you construct this story. It's like using a word processor. You're just typing in your text, you're uploading a couple of images if you want, and it can be really, really simple to go in and set the colors, put in this content. It doesn't take a web designer to do all this.
Right.
If you can use a word processor, you can do a great job of this.
Yeah. If you know how to drop and drag, I mean, it's really easy to put these things together. We of course have a team to help you do it, but I think it's so great to show, sort of take the pull the curtains back and to show the back end, to show just how easy it is to be able to put these things together with, and you know, there's always coaching and help that we can provide to help.
And I'm going to just say one more thing about this really quickly, try and squeeze this in, is crowdfunding is important to be authentic. And so authentic means you don't have to polish everything. And one of the key things about crowdfunding is talking back to the crowd and saying what's being done. And so these are the updates that they were posting to tell everybody about. When they, partway through their campaign, they got their first shipment of monsters because they got access to the funding right away and were able to go spend it and start bringing the monsters in. So they took a few photos of the boxes arriving in their office and they shared that with everybody. And when they did, they got a big boost in donations because people went, oh, it's working. Sure,
right.
We'll help. I'll get another one of those. That's cool. So that update thing, they blew through their goal. They raised their goal. They blew through it again. They raised it again. They blew through it again. And they thought the whole campaign was going to take 6 weeks, and they got most of it done in kind of over a week in the beginning. So important to know. I mean, you know, beginners attempt, but with help. They get there with help, and that's the kind of key point for you.
Right. So again, love this example. I think it's ideal for understanding the power of all these myths that we've been talking about. You know, that and showing that a little team can do a huge impact and build out their donor base, not cannibalize it, as well as, you know, really doing something that can expand the reach of their mission and their organization at large. So wanted to jump into some of the questions. Daryl, we had a specific question about the costs associated for using the platform, and I think that's a pretty easy one, Daryl.
People don't believe this, but it's actually free to use the platform.
Right.
There's no setup fee, there's no monthly fee, there's no annual fee, there's no maintenance fee, anything like that. It's important to get the most advanced technology we can in your hands for free, or absolutely as close to as possible. And that last little bit is that you still have to pay your payment processing fees to Stripe or to PayPal. But other than that, all that happens is we'll ask the donor for an optional, completely optional tip to us to help us run the platform. So the cost of the charity is really nothing. It's what you pay to process a donation on your website.
Right, and so a related question to that is how to handle those who are seeking tax receipts from a crowdfunding campaign.
The platform has the capability of delivering and creating tax receipts on your behalf. It's been fully checked out by CRA. We've done tens of thousands of these in Canada per year. So we know this works, and it delivers a really nicely formatted tax receipt as a PDF file that's emailed to the donor, which they can also access online afterwards.
And we also wanted to go back to the beginning of the presentation. We did the example that was a rapid response COVID-related campaign that was up in a week. There was one individual who launched it within the organization. And the person asked, what was the overall cost of doing this specific campaign? I think that relates to, well, we've answered part of it. There was no platform fees associated with it. And I guess it would also be the resources, and if the person was a paid employee or a contractor to help, or could have been actually a volunteer. We don't know. but
that's a really good point.
Are there any other sort of costs that that this person, you could fill this person in on?
Yeah, not normally. And one of the things that you just mentioned there is really important. The idea is that there's no per seat cost. So you can have volunteers come in to help you out, and the platform has the ability to delegate certain permissions to those people. So they can run the campaign on your behalf, but they don't get the access to the donor data, for example. So you can keep the donor data private, but they can still make changes to the campaign content or just be there to promote it in social media. Maybe they can't even make changes, but that's all kind of built into the platform to make it safer for you to leverage the resources you have available to you for free.
Right. And here's another question that's quite closely related. Do we have access to donor contact information? Is there a way to try to convert these donors to monthly donors?
Yes and yes. So all the donor data is available for download by you and you alone within your organization. So the donors that you get, you can get all the donor data that they're willing to share with you. We ask them for their information, and most donors will provide it. And as a result, you can use then that information to either try and get them involved in a recurring donation program, which you can also run on the campaign platform. The platform supports recurring donations. So one project you might have is your recurring donor base that'll support you, your sustainability fund, if you will. And those tools are all accessible in the platform as part of the basics of what we do.
Well, there's also one mention too about another organization that actually won our other award for crowdfunding at the Charity Village inaugural awards, and that was done by the Mariposa House, the Hospice of Aurelia, and it was a really good example of peer-to-peer kind of campaign with their Hike to Hospice campaign. And that's actually, there's a link to that in the chat, so they can check that out as a really good example. You know, along with our other award winner, which we've talked about today, the Worry Monster. We're almost at the end of our time together, Daryl. And as a wrap up, did you have any final brief thoughts that you wanted to leave with our audience?
Oh, brief, well, that part. So the key thing is get the questions in. We will endeavor to answer them, even if you haven't got them answered already in this conversation, because part of what we're really committed to is the education around this. So it's really important. But if I can give you some feedback that we got from a lot of customers as they got into this, is there's a little bit of a cold water shock when you first hit it, and then you go, but now the water's really fine. And now that we're in the pool, we can see a lot more ways to enjoy ourselves here and to work with this community to build up their support. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand initially, is how much your advocates, especially when you tell them the work that you're doing with them, not all on, it's because of their involvement, are much more willing to support you on a long-term basis in a much bigger way than before. And to have experienced that for some people, it can bring them to tears.
Well, those are great words to leave everyone by. I wanted to remind everyone that there are more information to set up free 15-minute coaching sessions. That's included in the chat. There's a link there. Thank you, Daryl, for sharing your valuable insights with our audience about the innovations in the crowdfunding space and showing us and sharing some great examples that we can all learn from. We hope that everyone who joined us today will launch a crowdfunding campaign soon and give us a try on the Charity Village crowdfunding platform. And thanks for joining us. And now I'd like to turn it over to Marina for some final words.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mary and Daryl. Wonderful presentation. It was so great to see all of that in action with those case studies. And I know our audience really appreciated that. So I just wanted to remind everyone before we sign off today that you will get a follow-up email later today with the link to the webinar recording. That link will go to a landing page where you can watch the webinar, but you can also access a lot of the resources that we shared here today. There will be a bit of a guide, a PDF guide that you can download, and also that link to the form to fill out if you would like to request a 15-minute coaching session. And I know a lot of you were putting in questions, really great questions about your specific organizations and your situations, and that would be a wonderful thing for you to follow up on with the coaching session, because we can definitely address that with those. The email that we send out later today will also have a survey link, so you can give us your feedback on today's session, and we will include information there about how to get started with Charity Village crowdfunding as well. On behalf of Charity Village, I'd like to thank all of you again for taking the time out of your busy days to join us today. Next week, we have another wonderful webinar coming up on low-cost, low-risk digital fundraising tools for your small nonprofit or charity. So I think many of you will be interested in joining that one as well. You can find more information on that and all of our upcoming webinars at charityvillage.com/webinars. Thank you again for taking part in today's session. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.